Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. I think a lot of college football fans can relate to this feeling where you're heading into a college football season. You kind of have that team that you're sitting there really believing in, probably a lot more than a lot of people around the country. And for those who've been listening for the last couple of weeks, really the last couple of months, them Texas A&M Aggies, kind of my team heading into 2024. Dill, not only do I think this team is one of the better teams in the SEC, and we're going to get into the reason why. I also want to take a look at their schedule. Probably their four biggest games: Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, Texas. Dill, they're all in College Station. And you talk about if you win that first game against Notre Dame, you start rolling a little bit. There's not a better home field advantage than the one at Kyle Field. I can see this team really being a dangerous team in 2024. Want to get into it. Before we do it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, Dill, the Texas A&M fans. It's been a blast talking this program over the last couple of weeks and months, and the amount of support y'all have shown the fellas, it means a lot. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear some feedback in the comment section. And Dill, let's get into this Texas A&M offense, and I want to have the conversation of what needs to click for this Texas A&M team to kind of be that dangerous team I think they can be heading into 2024. I'll ask you the question, what do you got for me?
I mean, it's 100% the offensive line. I actually think you look at this team, it's pretty primed on offense. I feel like all that talk about needing wide receivers in the portal, I really didn't necessarily see that. I think they're pretty good there. I really like Noah Thomas. I thought he looked awesome in the spring game. Jade Walker I thought was good. Moose Muhammad's a real veteran presence. And then you got some of the young guys in the transfers coming. I think that room's really good. I love Connor Wigman. I think if he has a team around him that plays a little bit better than they did last year for him and in a more creative offense, I think he's primed to have a good year, really good running backs. It's 100% to me. If this offensive line plays well, they can be a good offense.
I want to dig into Connor Wigman in the skill position, then really dig into the offensive line, because I am completely with you. And I think a lot of Texas A&M fans feel the same way. Like, they look at this offense and say, I like a lot of the pieces on this offense. If this offensive line can kind of come to life heading into 2024, and this offense is going to be able to attack you in a lot of different ways, right? You look at Connor Wigman. I think partially why I'm so high on Texas A&M is because I'm so high on Connor Wigman. I go back and watch some of those games early on. The offensive line, atrocious in that Miami game. Connor Wigman making a lot of high-level throws. This is, in my mind, one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC that nobody really knows about because you haven't seen that much of him, at least a healthy Connor Wigman, in a really long time. You look at the running back room, absolutely loaded. You noted the pass catchers, Dill. Let's dive into this offensive line. I think where I want to start with the offensive line, and kind of another reason, again, when you have these teams that you feel good about, there are a lot of reasons that you're kind of believing. I think one of the things that I'm just believing in is Coach Cushing is a massive upgrade from what we saw from Coach Adazio over the last 2 years. I remember having this same conversation with us 12 months ago, saying Texas A&M has the talent on the offensive line. They just haven't been able to put it together. You look at Trey Zune, potentially a guy like Robin Father as your bookend tackles. You kick Chase Basantis onto the inside. I look at this offensive line and say it can be good if Coach Cushing can kind of put this unit together heading into 2024.
And that is the frustrating part because you see talent in Trey Zune. I think he can be a very good left tackle, move the way you want him to move, but just wildly inconsistent. I mean, obviously, Father's a guy, if you've been listening, I've been talking about, like, just didn't seem to ever get it going health-wise last year or play-wise. Didn't even really play a whole lot, frankly. But you go back to the 2022 film, that looked like a guy you can very much believe in the SEC. So you have guys who can play. Again, I think you have a lot of talent, even young talent at that, in the interior spots with guys like Cam Dewberry, Basantis, Naboo, like guys who, again, you've seen the flashes of like the physical ability to play that position at a high level. But yeah, you're right. Like something's got to click. Some way this coaching staff needs to get them playing on the same page, not missing assignments like they have in the past. And if they do that, it's not at all about physical talent in my mind with this Texas A&M line.
Want to know who I think the X factor is on this offensive line? I think it's Ruben Father. Like, if you go back to him out of high school and said, all right, basketball background, big body that's functional with the feet. You said it best in 2022, Dill. You were getting some buzz out of that 2022 season. He was an NFL draft prospect. So you're talking about a guy that has all the potential in the world. If he can put it together at one of those tackle spots. You can kick Chase Basantis inside, which is probably his ideal position. You improve massively at two different positions heading into 2024. Cautiously optimistic. I think Coach Cushing is a phenomenal offensive line coach. This offensive line comes
right.
alive.
That Duke offensive line always played better than what they were. I mean, they didn't necessarily have like the talent or anything near the talent of what this A&M team is going to trot out there, but they were always really sound. They developed guys at a really high level. You see what they do with guys like Graham Barton and some of those other guys. They always got the most out of what they were doing with that offensive line. And again, that's kind of something obviously goes beyond the offensive line, frankly, with the Elko era, but especially in that unit, they need to get that room going in playing like they frankly should.
So moving over to the defense, right? We kind of established that offensive line comes alive. This offense is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the SEC. Moving over to the defense, like people who have listened for the last year, they know the first thing I look for on the defense when I'm evaluating the offseason. I want to see a dominant defensive line. And when you have a smothering defensive line, you think about the Michigan Wolverines in 2023, you think about the Georgia Bulldogs over the last couple of years, it gets so much easier to play defense. You have the ability to stop the run in first and second down, get after the passer and third down. You have a dominant defensive line. You can take over games on the defensive side of the football. When I look at this Texas A&M defensive line, when I go back and watch the spring game, it's one of the best defensive lines in the country, right? You add a guy in Nick Skirton who I think could be a top 50 NFL draft pick. You have a guy in Shamar Stewart who's going into year 3, also probably potential to be a top 50 draft pick. You kind of know what you have with Shamar Turner. If you get some jumps from guys like DJ Hicks, Gabriel Brown-Ladindi, I look at this Texas A&M defensive line and say, how many units across the country can you name that are better than Texas A&M?
And I'm with you. I mean, the edge play is going to be as good as you'll see in the country. I think those guys are monsters. I really like what they're doing there. I think, to me, the guy I'm looking for is DJ Hicks. I thought that spring game, I thought you saw too much inconsistency, similar to what you saw last year a little bit, where, again, you see the flash, the dominance, the physical ability to play at a really high level, and then you see plays where giving up big creases and giving up big runs. That's the one thing that stood out in the spring game. Like, man, if they tighten the screws there, this team's going to be a wrecking crew because they make a lot of negative plays. They rush the passer at an exceptionally high level. They just need to, again, like, prevent big plays in the run game. And I think that starts with having guys like Hicks, Brownlow Dinley, who didn't play in the spring game. So that is a factor. Shamar Turner, same thing. If those bigger guys play better football and can stuff the middle a little bit more effectively and not give up those creases, that's the one thing I think you're kind of looking for, frankly, as your improvement to get it rolling in the season.
Mike Elko and this coaching staff are going to have a field day with using it. You have so many guys that you can move around the defensive line, get as much talent as you. I mean, there's a possibility that Texas A&M's trotting out potentially 3 top 100, top 50 NFL draft picks, Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, and Nick Skirton. And because of the size that they all bring to the table, you can kick one into the 3-tech, have them all on the field at the same time. I think they're going to get really creative with that defensive line. You got one of the better backers in the SEC, Torian York. I think bringing in Solomon to Shields, massive. In the secondary, at the end of the day, it's kind of just a numbers game. Like, they brought in so much talent. Mike Elko, is kind of a genius when it comes to working the back end. I have a hard time seeing this Texas A&M secondary not be good because you have a great coaching staff back there. You have a ton of talent, whether it's guys that are returning, whether it's guys that were brought into the portal. Now, Dill, you all know I love this Texas A&M team, right? How it's constructed. I think it's a really good team. To make the college football playoffs, to kind of do something special, you also want to draw a good schedule. And you look at this schedule, kind of going back to how we opened it up, you got 4 games that are probably your toughest games you're going to play. Notre Dame, Missouri, LSU, Texas, all 4 of those games are at home. And I look at how this schedule goes. If you can win at home week 1 in the Mike Elko era, I see you win 4 straight, 5 straight up until that Missouri game. And then you're going undefeated, hosting a Missouri Tiger team in Kyle Field. You start scrolling down this schedule and say, if you can win 2 out of those 4 kind of toss-up games at home, maybe even 3 out of 4, I mean, this is a college football play. This is a team that's going to be in the college football playoffs come December.
Yeah, and I think there is one benefit of you missed two teams in Alabama and or Alabama and Georgia, I should
Yes,
say, that are the two teams that I think would really present difficult matchups because I think they'd get after them up front. I mean, those two teams, the way they recruit the defensive line position, the way they've been able to develop it, I think those two teams are the ones like you almost look at not to say you can't beat them, but you're like they're typically an issue. I mean, just the way they can pressure Texas A&M, you avoid those two teams. I don't necessarily see dominant defensive lines in that group. Texas is probably the best group, and I think they'll be very good, but I don't think they'll be quite what they were last year in terms of just suffocating teams. And I think that's another big part because that probably gives you the chance to be in all these games. And if you can put yourself in those positions, and you can obviously probably, I think you might be able to lose 3 games and still have a chance at getting in. You might
100%.
have
And you look at the games they play on the road and kind of how I look at schedules. You want your games that you feel comfortable with, probably on the road. You want the games that are probably toss-ups, the ones that you got to win, the big games. You want them at home. You go on the road at Florida. I mean, I don't see Florida blocking up Texas A&M, quite frankly. You kind of continue to scroll down. You go on the road at Mississippi State. I think that's pretty clear win. On the road at South Carolina, another team that struggles on the offensive line. I have a hard time seeing South Carolina block up Texas A&M. You continue to scroll down. When you go on the road at Auburn, we're just not really sure what Auburn is. I'm relatively high on them, but at the end of the season, they have a lot of young talent. We'll see how that rolls. And I can see this team being kind of sitting at 8-9 wins, having Texas at home before the SEC championship game. That game potentially would be one of the biggest games that we'll see in all of college football during the regular season. Obviously, the rivalry aspect, but I think there's a real possibility both of those teams are playing for a spot in the SEC championship game and really trying to make their case to make the college football playoffs. I think Texas A&M has a really sneaky good team, but more importantly, I think they have a really gettable schedule and as favorable as it gets in the SEC. I'm fired up for this team. Again, we'll talk a lot about this program in the summer, doing deep dives, film reviews. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.